Sauce.
Hey, you like Pez?
It looks like that. Here's Heaney from the boundary line. He's an expert at these. From the boundary line!
Hello and welcome to Behind the Boundary podcast. I'm your host Pez. I'm here with Sauce, and we are here on a Wednesday after a big weekend of footy and a big Sunday session as well, Sauce, when we went to Melbourne versus Geelong.
Yeah, hey guys, the reason we are recording on a Wednesday is Pez has just recovered. He was a little bit worse for wear on the Sunday night after a few bevs and couldn't get it up for the game Monday night, couldn't get up for Tuesday, and a sloppy Wednesday. I'm looking at you, Pez.
That's a big call coming from you when you said, "Oh, why are you going on holidays?" And then you go on a mystery trip on a Tuesday. Didn't even tell me where he's going, and then he goes, "Oh, I'm just at Geelong. I'll be back soon."
Typical.
Well, you go away to Geelong. There's no footy going on. Why are you going down to that shit town?
Typical Pez, just dodging the question, addressing what you said. You said the reason we were doing it on a Wednesday is because you had a seedy Monday. Would that be wrong?
I was not up for it on Monday. Definitely not calling that. I said, let's do it on Tuesday. Oh, I can't do it Tuesday. I'm going away. All right, no questions asked. Where you go? You go to Geelong.
Oh, you're a bit of a liar then. No questions asked, and the first thing you do is ask a question.
I didn't ask the question. I said you told me. You told me you're coming back from Geelong, and that's how I found out.
I went to Geelong. It was a nice little day trip. Went to a nice winery down there. Enjoyed the nice wind on the edge of the cliff because it was freaking freezing. But it was a good little getaway. Thanks for asking.
I will tell you what's happening with that. The supporters and the listeners, they don't want to listen to that crap. They want to listen to us talk about the footy. But the Sunday, very frustrating for you as a Cats man, sitting there. We were playing in the second quarter, one of my favourite games, things you never hear at the footy.
Things you never hear at the football. Geez, it was funny because the game was already seemed lost for Geelong that early on the stage. And we
dominated.
Just went to town on it. We played it for about a quarter while smacking back a couple of mids. But no, Pez, one of the questions we did ask on that, if anyone knows, are they mids on a Sunday afternoon? Because they didn't taste like middies. They tasted like full-strength beer.
Look, they never used to be mids on an Arvo game on a Saturday or a Sunday, but then they I think they did change that rule, or they didn't change that rule. I actually have no idea and hadn't been to the footy at the MCG in over a year, so interesting to know the answer to that if anyone does know, at Behind the Bound, Twitter, Facebook and Instagram there, and we'll go from there.
All right, Pez, what was one of the best ones? Things never said at the footy.
Well, you said I was a bit seedy Monday. I can't actually remember some of the beautiful calls I had. I had you laughing all day there, Sauce.
But it was a combination back thing. There was a little bit of ping pong there.
I'm sure you got one.
Yeah, of course. It was, the umpires, I wish they were a bit more involved in this game. You could talk about, we had one about the bit of a trash to the All-Australians, saying Melbourne are rucking really well with one ruckman. I wish they had two All-Australian ruckmans in the one side.
They could have, and it didn't even matter because Geelong, that's what we were saying. My question to you was, Geelong have gone out and recruited all these players. Sauce have recruited Higgins and Dalhouse, players like that over the years. Why did they never recruit Todd Goldstein?
Why didn't they recruit a ruckman anywhere? Why didn't they draft a ruckman? What is wrong with Geelong? And this is a bigger issue. Things never said at the football. Geez, Geelong's ruckman's good because we've never got a ruckman. It's horrible. Yeah,
it's held you back. It's not too good, but. We will get into our recap of the games, and we're doing it within our favourite segments, Sauce. We've got a lot of them here on Behind the Boundary, and the first one we'll start with is over-under.
Parker over his head.
I think Hawkins got a little under. Out the back, Dangerfield got Kelly over the top. Runs into the open goal. You've got to be kidding, because there's no doubt more of the goal over the line.
And our first game that we do now, these, Sauce, as we know from last week, are not always in order, but we are starting from the first game, from the Thursday night. We've got Sydney versus Essendon. Sydney won by 3 points in the end, 83-80. A good watch on a Thursday night. Essendon supporters filthy at the end there, Sauce. So you've got an over-under.
Yeah, well, before we get into the over-under, I think Essendon supporters were filthy with the last decision, the Tom Hickey decision, which I'll get into the end, Pez. But I think Sydney supporters should have been more filthy, the fact that they almost squandered this lead. They had 28 scoring shots to 20, and in that last quarter, Papley especially, just firing away, blazing away a goal, and they could not put Essendon away. And if they put Essendon away, then we wouldn't even be talking about this, marking out of taking the ball out of the ruck and being tackled, and the umpire like AFL coming out and saying that it was the right call, we would be talking about the domination that Sydney had on Essendon, because they dominated all facets of this game coming into that last quarter, and they just needed to put it on the scoreboard.
Yeah, they did. Like Essendon were decent going up forward. The part of the game source that I wasn't happy with Sydney was their defence when they were kicking behinds and squandering opportunities. Essendon were going end to end, and they kicked 3 goals in a row there in that second quarter, and it just looked lost for all thing. You're going up against this Essendon side full of confidence, a 75-point win over St Kilda the week before. Sydney came out the first quarter, kicked 2-5 to 4-1, and they nearly stuffed it up there in the second quarter when Essendon came out, kicked the first 3, but Sydney kicked 5 goals after that to close out the half and take a halftime lead, which was good by them. But then they still squandered opportunities and still nearly let Essendon go down the other end and steal it.
Yeah, they did. Buddy Franklin here kicked his 950th goal and kicked an absolute cracker in the last quarter as well to seal the deal for the Swans. And you're right about this, is that, there's nothing a bigger killer in football when a team goes down, they've had all the forward pressure, and then Essendon or any team goes end to end, score a goal. It's a backbreaker, and it almost cost Sydney their unbeaten streak.
Oh, it definitely did, and it's not great, but it is great for Essendon fans. I think Jake Stringer's return to the side is really giving them something up forward and giving them something else. Cale Hooker kicked another 3 goals, and I keep saying just you can't play him up forward, but he actually got one and rove the pack and snapped it over his shoulder. Waterman's come in, he kicked 2 straight, but the guy I'm looking at here is Nick Cox, the big bloke running down on the wing. He kicked a beautiful goal on the opposite foot. But then he had a set shot later in the game source, and he's kicked it with his right boot, and he's got nowhere near it. And if he kicked that, I think Essendon nearly go on to win that game. So he kicked one too, the big fella. Yeah,
and a very versatile sort of player. He basically played everywhere around the ground except for the ruck. But even though for his size, he probably could have played in the ruck as well. A lot of comparisons went out to Adam Goodes in terms of the versatility around the ground. He can sort of do everything. But you're a little bit disappointing that when it comes to the basic stuff, continually AFL players let fans down and let themselves down in their clubs by not doing the easy stuff and just, making shit easy for everyone, realistically. And that's probably the way it is. If he kicks the basic stuff, kicks the right goal, then they're good to go. They probably go on and win it.
Well, that's the thing as well. And one other thing I want to mention is if you've got a player that's in defence source and you want to use them and they've got a beautiful kick, you've got to use him throughout the whole game. Nick Hind for the Bombers, he had 4 touches, 2 in each quarter in the first half to half time. He finished the game on 19 touches and looked really damaging, kicking the ball inside forward 50. But they just weren't using him, or he was standing in the wrong positions. I think that's got to be looked at. If you're going to use him as an elite ball user, running off the back line, a fast-paced type player, you've got to get him open in more positions to be able to do that.
Yeah, 100%, Pez. It's like, why do teams go away from things that are working for 3/4 of a game and then change the style? It's the same thing as the other one. If you've got people that are doing the right thing, reward them, give them the ball. It's, you compare it quite often. I just compared it then is that when teams go away from something that's working, and then they become stolted, Sydney continually attacked the footy in this. They were just inaccurate. If they had tried and stalled the game and tried to slow it down and gone away what they'd done them to get them in front, they would have messed this game up and they would have lost by heaps. So it's good to see that aspect of it. But you are right, when teams go away from things that are working and don't continually attack or don't continually use players, or guys kicked 4 or 5 goals. I always compare it to like Russell Westbrook. You watch him play, and when they were going through those championship sort of aspirations in the OKC days, Kevin Durant would hit 4 or 5 shots, and then Westbrook would freeze him out of the game. It's like that's what the AFL needs to do. They need to continually do the things to get the ball to the players that are making impact.
Yeah, if Jake Stringer's on fire and he's kicked 3 and a quarter,
as much as no one likes him, give him the ball.
Keep giving him the ball. That's the thing. You got an over/under for this one?
I do have an over/under, and this one is again we're talking about a decision this is the 3rd week in a row that there's been a 50-50, a bit of dubious, probably 80-20 decision that the 8 umpires have messed up ideally, but. The biggest story out of this one for me, and something that we harp on, Pez, all the time, is The AFL has actually come out so Tom Hickey's taken the ball out of the ruck, taken 2 or 3 steps, clearly been tackled. Not only did he get tackled and the ball spill out, so he didn't dispose of it correctly. The umpires have said, no, you know what, we'll ball it up. Everyone knew it was holding the ball. It was very clear that. And it wasn't because of the rule where, you're taking it out of the ruck and being tackled.
Hey, before you keep going, the AFL actually came out and gave the tick of approval to this one.
And this is where my over-under is that we're getting to a stage in the AFL. So every round we're having this thing, and for the first time ever, the AFL came out and said that the decision was wrong for the Brisbane-Geelong game. So there's 17 rounds where we're averaging 1 a week, right? I'm going to put it down lower, about 6.5. The times that the AFL is going to come out and say that they've made an error, which is very high, I think. I might have to get a bit lower.
No, that's too high, Source. That's way too high.
Maybe 4.5 I'll go. 4.5 over-under that the AFL will come out and use it as an educational learning experience rather than no, we're doing a good job and put it under the rug.
I hope you keep a tally on this one, because I'm going to say that if it does happen, it'll happen one more time this season. It'll be a blatantly obvious call like the Geelong-Brisbane game, because they just haven't had the history of doing that, Source. They just don't want to come out and say, yep, this umpire was wrong for whatever reason. They don't want to put pressure on the umpires or whatever. That's actually their job, and it would actually be better if you did put pressure on that umpire, because it teaches every other umpire in this at the same time.
But I don't think it's about putting pressure on. It's about looking at the long-term aspect of things. If we continually say that wrong decisions are right, then when that same decision gets made later on, that's going to be wrong as well. Now we've got 2 that are wrong, rather than someone goes, hey, that's right. That was wrong. You need to blow it this way. And then the next time it happens, there's no excuse, because the first offence is going to be like, well, last week you told me that was right. And when it's very clearly that's the wrong interpretation of the rule.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely under on it. They're not going to be able to do that or change that. One thing I did find interesting on AFL Twitter was when the Essendon supporters were talking about a couple of times when the ruckman for Sydney actually took it out of the ruck and got tackled straight away. He didn't dispose of the ball. The ball spilled out in the tackle. They wanted holding the ball. Apparently some supporters can't keep up with the rule changes, and I don't blame them, because the rules change all the time. But the ruck free kick, when they grab it out of the ruck and you get tackled straight away, Source, it's actually not a free kick anymore. It's just to teach a couple of those fans on Twitter.
Yeah, but that wasn't the reason that incident was holding the ball. It was the fact that he got the ball, he then took 3 or 4 steps and had prior opportunity to dispose of it, then was tackled and the ball spilled out, so he didn't dispose of it correctly.
But see, this is where the grey area is. If the ball spills out in the tackle,
but he didn't dispose of it
correctly. If the ball spills out in the tackle, that's what they use as an excuse. But sometimes they will pay incorrect disposal. So it's really confusing sometimes. We're 4 rounds in, and a rule like that shouldn't have that big of a grey area.
Well, the holding the ball rule in itself has so many grey areas, because there's incorrect disposal, there's not making a genuine attempt, there's prior opportunity, there's...
You dragged it in.
You dived on it. There's so many different aspects to the rule. But the thing is, Pez, every AFL fan at the grounds and watching it and the media seem to understand the rule. Would that be fair? I feel like it'd have more of an understanding of the rule than what the AFL do.
Sometimes you got to feel like if the commentators are actually coaching from the commentary box, it'd be a little bit better. I don't know. We do have to move on from that first scintillating game of only 3 points. The next game, St Kilda versus West Coast. Absolutely unbelievable here, with St Kilda being 33 points down during that third quarter and coming back to win by 20. Still trailing by 10 at 3/4 time. So they absolutely piled it on. They scored 54 Source to 1. They went on a 54-1 run to win the game.
They kicked 8 consecutive goals coming into that third quarter / fourth quarter. Like, incredible thing. And it was led by your favourite man, Max King. He was absolutely...
The King is back.
He was absolutely astounding out there with career best, which I was surprised at. A career best 5 goals. Feel like every time that he's on the verge of those big games, he gets a little bit nervous around the 4 mark. But, we also saw some people pop up that needed to have popped up in the last couple of weeks. Dan Butler was pretty good with 3 goals. Jack, man of steel, Jack, Captain Jack.
Always good.
33 disposals and 1 goal for him. But it was some of those other underwhelming performers throughout your early on this season that came alive in that fourth quarter.
Yeah, there's 2 big names for me. There's Brad Hill, who was actually showing effort and wanted the footy and wanted to kick it, and he was actually disposing of the ball very, very well. He had 26 touches, 19 of those being kicks. And the other guy who wasn't so impressive the week before in a 75-point loss against Essendon, it was Brad Crouch, the recruit from Adelaide. His clearance work, he had 13 kicks, 13 handballs for 26 touches. He kicked it behind as well, but his clearance work inside is going to make so much more when the Saints are better. When Dan Hanbury was playing for the Saints last year, his inside work was absolute gold. Obviously, with injuries, he's not going to play that often. So if Brad Crouch can take on that role and really get the ball out to players like Billings and Hill, who, if they're accurate kicks, you've got a bloke, Max King, who can win the Coleman down in the forward line. So use him.
Yeah, and I think you sort of alluded to a point that I was going to get to, that the trust in the coach was really, he was one of the main reasons that you guys came back in this game, because in that first half, I think not only having the trust in those players that did perform in that fourth quarter to continually instill and go like, you know what, we know we're going to continually go with this side because this is the right side for the win. They adjusted their game plan. That first half of football, it's like they didn't realise they were playing West Coast Eagles, because all they were doing was getting the ball out quick, running the ball quickly, and then bombing it high and long into the West Coast defence line or the St Kilda forward line, which is, if you're going to do it against any team, don't do it against West Coast. Like, that is their bread and butter. That's where they go and that's where they unload. But then, you know, that coming out of half-time, they made some great adjustments. They adjusted their game plan, and hello behold, they got a win.
Well, what do you got? 10 goals to 3 in the second half. And you had 27 scoring shots to 17, plus 10 for scoring shots for a team, West Coast, who are going to be bleeding. They've gone to Marvel twice now and lost. Well, they were up by, I think, 7 against the Bulldogs, 12 against the Bulldogs, had a kick to go up 3. Could have had those two, banked them as 2 wins and put the pressure off them. But now the pressure's right on. They've got to really win those games, and they've got to sneak a couple more away. So after being 33 points up, I'm not sure what Adam Simpson would have said to them. A long trip back, and they've got Collingwood this week, so they might come out.
Really big game.
They might come out a bit. But my thing that I've got for you, a little over-under for you, Source, is a comeback by more than 30 points in the second half. So if a team's down by more than 5 goals within the second half, how many times this season will a team come back and steal the victory? I've put the line at 3.5. 17 rounds left, 3.5 times.
Is that including the 2 times it's happened now? You're saying from this point on?
From now.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think the way that the media has been talking about it this week and how astounding people are that, you know, especially in this way football can go, that we don't really see teams once they get on top. They let go of that lead. But I guess what it shows is that if the coaches make the right adjustments and the game plan shifts a little bit, then this can happen, because they piled on 8 goals, Pez. Like, that's something that you know, wouldn't see in the old days of football. 3.5, that's very high. I'm going to go over. I'll go over.
You're over. I'll definitely stick under that, because that's something unbelievable. I know if you're 30 points down at half time, you can come back and win, and that will still count. So you need that to happen 4 times there, Source. But I can't see that happening unless North are up by 30 points at half time or something like that.
And that's what I'm sort of hoping, is that there'll be a team that gets out of the gates late and be, you know, very happy. And we'll talk about North Melbourne and when we get to them in the next segment. But, you know, they'll be very happy that they're leading at half time, or they're like this or whatever. I mean, you look at the Sydney versus Richmond game, everyone thought that Richmond were going to come back in that third quarter, and they did show glimpses, but they just needed a couple of things to go right, and it would have happened. But
when a couple of things don't go wrong,
you can't stop the bleeding, as you would have known as a Saints fan the week before.
Hey, as we know, 4 rounds of footy already, so many upsets and so many massive upsets this season. Anything can happen in footy, and things will happen in footy. What happened here was not so much an upset, but Gold Coast playing at home at Metricon against Carlton, lost by 11 points, Carlton 70 to Gold Coast 59. A lot more scoring shots to Carlton, who sprayed a lot of scoring opportunities. What happened to the Gold Coast Suns here?
It was very simple, Pez. Like we spoke earlier in the season about how they were going to make the Gold Coast Metricon Arena a fortress for them, and they were not going to allow any team to escape there with wins. But simple thing was that they had no rucks. Like, you know, last week, Jared Witts, the co-captain, he went down with a pretty devastating season-ending knee injury. And listen to this lineup of people that attended ruck contests and actually were their ruckmen. They had defender Caleb Graham, who did the bulk of it, Chris Burgess, Hugh Greenwood, and even Took Miller jumped in there a couple of times to help out.
I loved it when he actually got the hit out, and the commentators actually got the stat up.
Yeah.
He's actually had 5 hit outs in his career, Took Miller.
It's incredible. Like, But for me, this game was not just about the ruck work, because the Gold Coast, they were allowed to be in this game because Carlton had a second quarter that they jumped out to a little bit here and there, and it was through the ruck contest. But for me, it was the inconsistency of some of the players that we've been, really tipping our hat to in the first month or so. The Gold Coast, we're not going to use these as excuses anymore of these players that they're not stepping up. But you had, Noah Anderson was fantastic. Jack Bowers was pretty good. Swallow's always good. Alice is always good. We need those other young players that we've been talking about, Rankine and King, and some of those other players that we've been, really excited to and talked about. You need them to be starting to build more consistent approaches, because I feel if those other 3 or 4 players, mentioned, play well, Gold Coast win, because Carlton really didn't want to win this game. They were doing everything in their power to give Gold Coast the chocolates.
Especially in the last quarter. You know how we spoke about in the Essendon game getting the ball in Hines' hands? They've got a bloke who's an amazing, beautiful kick of the footy. Jack Lukosius only had 13 disposals. 11 of those were kicks. But if he's not having 20, 25 disposals a game, Gold Coast Suns, you're doing something wrong. Get the ball in that man's hands and good things will happen. Now, it was a 1-point game at 3/4 time, and Carlton came out. They kicked 1 goal, 7. So, as you said, did absolutely everything in their power to try and lose it. Gold Coast only managed 3 behinds in that last quarter, and to only lose by 11 points was a little bit embarrassing in the end for Carlton. But they get the 4 points. That's what they needed. And big thing about the Gold Coast this year, Source, I had them in the 8, but after going 1 and 3, realistically, you look back at all their games, they could be 4 and zip. Mm-hmm. And they're 1 and 3, and they're in trouble.
They definitely are in trouble, Pez, and it's disappointing, because I think you had them, and a lot of people were sort of 50-50 on whether this is the year that they were going to make that jump. I said they're probably 1 more year away, and I think they're a bit unlucky. Like, they've had they've had their ruckman go down. They've had probably their best player, who's played now a combination of 5 games for them, go down. They're getting players that are still trying to find their feet, but it's hard trying to build a dynasty and build a culture of winning when you don't have the same players on the park there. And they're really going to struggle with no ruckman in the next couple of weeks. I think they've got some big games against teams that have established ruckmans that, realistically, it's going to be hard to win the pill when you don't get first look at it.
Well, they got the Dogs, then the Suns, and the Pies. So
the Suns play the Suns. Suns play the Suns, do they?
Oh, they better. If they've got a bye and they play the Suns, they might actually get a win. How good's that? Oh, the Swans.
The Swans, that's a bit better there, Piers. But again, 3 teams that have established ruckmans. I
was going to say Stefan Martin, you got Tom Hickey, Brody Grundy. So, ugh.
But if you look at that game, right, if they have a ruckman and they had Matty Rowell playing, they're all achievable, winnable games, especially because I would assume probably one or two of those are at home at the Gold Coast. So, and that's the issue, and it's disappointing for the Suns, because this was the year that they needed to win all their home games as a starting point to make a run at it next year.
Look, they lose all 3 games and they're in trouble. So the over-under here is Gold Coast season's over. Now, Source, you had them at 12th on your ladder pre-season. I had them in the 8, as I said. So we'll sit them in the middle. Ladder position 10. Do you think they go over, so 10 or above, or under 11 or below?
Yeah, I think, unfortunately for the Gold Coast Suns, I have to go under, and mainly because there are teams that aren't performing that well, like Brisbane. You've got a couple of teams down the bottom that we just don't know about, in terms of like Carlton and Collingwood and GWS, those teams that people predicted to be around that area. And if you compare their lists are just a little bit more on the park, to be honest. There's no real. Adelaide's not the easy beat that they were. We predicted at the start of the year, so they're probably going to struggle against some of those ones. Same with Freo. They'll play Hawthorn and North, but I think they're going to be well under.
Just heartbreaking. I have to go with you on the under as well. Unfortunate for the Gold Coast Suns there. That concludes our segment of over and under. We've spoken about 3 games. There are 6 to go, Source, and we head into big win, little win.
Speaking of 2 of those teams that we actually just mentioned there, Pez, Collingwood and GWS, we've talked about big upsets. This was a huge upset, but not really. Realistically, there was 2 teams that hadn't won many games, and they were not playing that well, and they are under-delivering for the talent that people have to say that they've got in the field. Collingwood came up really short at the MCG, which would be heartbreaking, especially to, a bit of a rivalry that I think that's building, because we remember the famous victory that GWS had at the MCG, sneaking one to get into a grand final. this was a huge win for the club, winning by 30 points against the helpless Magpies.
Helpless Magpies, indeed. There was losing by 5 goals to the Giants, big upset. Now, there was big talk the week before when Grundy absolutely dominated in hitouts, but they didn't do what they needed to do, Collingwood. It's the same story here. There was 44 hitouts to 18 overall. Most of those were to Brodie Grundy against Mumford. 36 to 32 clearances in favour of GWS, and the centre clearances, GWS +4 as well. So they got +4 for the whole game, and most of that was in the centre where you've got your ruckman and your 3 midfielders ready to go. So that's really, really disappointing that the Pies weren't able to address that. And GWS, the man of the hour, Mr. Toby Green, if he performs, they perform, and he kicked 5.
Not only that, though, Pez, it's the way that he did it. Like, he was captaining the side in the absence of Stephen Coniglio there, and he took his tally for this season to 13 goals and absolutely dominated, but not just on the scoreboard. His leadership and led from the front, and that's what we've been asking the GWS Giants to do. And maybe that's what they need. Maybe he needs to be they need to take over the role as captain, and that is the heart and soul, because they played for him on Saturday night. They were all for him. They were all in there. They looked fantastic, absolutely fantastic. They were doing the team things. They were running the ball. Again, Collingwood didn't have take the opportunities from the ruck that they were getting, but in saying that, GWS looked good. They looked back to the team that we believe them to be.
Is Brodie Grundy too easy to read, or do the Collingwood midfield have a bit more work to do? Because Callum Ward had 37, Toreno 34, and Hopper 32. Most of them in the middle for most of the night. So big possessions, whereas 2 Collingwood players had over 30, and they just had 30 inside bottom and Crisp, who you'd say are more wingman type player and get their ball out on the wing. So who's going to win the ball in the middle of the ground for Collingwood moving forward, because they're in a bit of strife after that loss?
Yeah, they're in big trouble, I think, Collingwood. I actually spoke about this at the start of the year, Pez. I said this could be a potentially, 2 teams that are 0-4, and we could be discussing about the team that's going to be first to the finish line to lose their coach. Collingwood go up next week against the West Coast Eagles. They'll be back at Optus Stadium for them, and Nathan Buckley could be in a lot of trouble because there's a range of different decisions, and it's not really his fault because of what the club has allowed them to be left with after, the exit that they had last year famously. And it's not his fault, but they will need to start to address it. They had, they had a couple of injuries that are not going to help for next week. They're playing an in-form West Coast Eagles. When I say in-form, when they play at SBS Stadium, they're in form.
Yeah, it doesn't matter who they're playing against, does it? They usually win. Big win, little win here. I'm going to go a big loss for Collingwood, and the reason for that is they had the same issue the week before. They weren't able to address it and get it over and done with, so I've already mentioned that in terms of Brodie Grundy and his hit-out dominance. If he's going to hit it out like that, just smash the ball forward and try and get a contest at half forward or something. Try something different, because it's not working, and it didn't work, and they got dominated in the middle, and that's what led to their 5-goal demise on the weekend.
Yeah, for me, I'm going big win for the GWS forward line, Pez, because we've spoken about this a couple of times about they seem to get the ball in there and they just don't use it efficiently. On the weekend, they had 48 inside 50s, 4 less than Collingwood actually, but they had 20 shots from 48 entries. As we said, Green had 5-1, Finlayson kicked 4-2, Kelly had 2, Himmelberg had 2 shots on goal, 3 shots on goal. That's a big win for them, because that has been one of their problems, that they just continually get the ball in there and then do nothing with it.
There you go, Giants fans. You got a big win for the season. Well done. Their first win for the season as well. So that's another big win for them. We move on to the next game source. We had North taking on the Adelaide Crows. North leading at 3/4 time. We're watching this on the way to the footy on the tram, and Adelaide ended up winning by 41 points.
Yeah, it's pretty disappointing for North Melbourne, because the Crows looked dead and buried. They trailed by 4 points, as you said, at 3/4 time, but it wasn't because they were down. They had given away a big lead in that third quarter already. They were up, I think it was about 3 or 4 goals. North Melbourne came back. They dominated that third quarter. They went in and they looked like they were going to take the run for it, but then I said this on the train pairs. I said this could go one or two ways. Adelaide could come out and respond, or North Melbourne could be just content that they're actually in the game and then lie down and die, and that's what they did. And lie down they did.
So you think they're just full of praise at 3/4 time? Well done, boys. We're in the game. We're going to have a beer after the game. This is all good. So not moving the magnets around or not actually continuing to put the effort in and try and win the games. Now, North, it's not their fault, mate. Look at their list. They don't have that. They were 4 points ahead. Aaron Hall was impressive with 33 disposals. Jai Simpkin was back to his best as well, but too little and too late because no one did it in the fourth quarter and absolutely dominated. McAdam, I think he had most of his goals. He kicked 3, at least 2 of them in that last quarter there. Texans started the game on fire again, kicked 2 goals. Straight, 2 straight at the start. He finished with 3 as well. Fogarty had 3. Schoenberg had 2. Stevenson was really good as well. He had 2 goals too. Goldstein went forward and kicked 2 goals. Nick Larkey was impressive with 3 goals. So something to look forward to for North. But what I want to know, are North fans happy with that performance? They were up at 3/4 time, which losing by 128 points the week before, not too good. But then you lose by 41 points. I don't know how they would feel.
Yeah, I think... Do you know what's good is that the players that responded weren't just this, like the senior players all responded. They had all their senior players, people like, Larkey, Goldstein was in there. Hall, you had, some of the newcomers in terms of Stevenson, but Zeeble and Thomas, they all stood up. That's a positive for the club. Now, running to the finish line, we can make excuses that maybe that they ran out of legs. They did have a pretty, a concussion early on there from Zerha. They had McDonald, probably one of their best players in the last couple of seasons. He was laid out with that pectoral muscle tear, bit of a tear. Bit
of fatigue. We'll put that down.
Well, it could be fatigue, but I would be happy with that, considering the probably piss poor performance they've put up for the first 2 weeks.
I was speaking to a mate today and you put yourself in North's shoes, show a bit of empathy. What are you hoping for each week? What would be a goal you would set as a North supporter, do you think?
That we get beaten by skill error, not by decision making. So, we miss kick a couple here and we turn over and get scored against. Not that we're showing effort. So we're showing effort. We're trying to implement a game plan, which, as I said to you last week with the Western Bulldogs, they're sticking with this game plan. It does look all right. And when they connect with that skill level, it works. We saw that against Adelaide in that little bit of a comeback. That's the stuff that I would be happy with when a team's in the rebuild. And we continually see improvement from those young draftees that they're getting.
You know what I'm going with? Let's lose by less than 80 points. Be happy if we lose by less than 80.
You just hate North Melbourne, mate. They've come back. They were leading at 3/4 time, which you would never have
against last year's wooden spooners.
But they've never looked like leading anyone at half at 3/4 time or even a quarter time.
I can't believe the scoreline. I can't believe the scoreline. 41 points.
Yeah, that was incredible.
In a quarter.
All right, so whether you big win, little win, Pez?
Oh, big loss. North Melbourne, I know you lost by less than 80 points, and I just said anything under 80 is good, but to be leading at 3/4 time, you've got to still be in the fight to that final 5 minutes and still going for it. You just gave up, and you don't want that. I know there were 2 men down or whatever. They had the medical sub come on, so 1 man down on the bench, but North, you got to show more than that. So it's a massive, massive loss and massive disappointment for your fans.
Yeah, for me, I'm going big win just for Adelaide in general. They get their 3rd win of the season, which they didn't get that last year at all. They've there's a lot of things to like from this. They responded after being challenged at 3/4 time. They got out to a massive lead, 41 points in the end, and actually that winning margin. And as well as that, as I said, they're sitting 5th on the AFL ladder. They're 3-1, and they're winning games away from home as well. Tick, tick, tick. Big win for Adelaide Football Club.
No one's expecting that at the start of the year.
Way.
They're expecting them to beat North, but be 1-3 maybe.
But at the start of the season, we said that, they'll probably split those games. North Melbourne probably win the one at Marvel, and Adelaide will probably win
That's what you said, but not me, mate.
Christ, you're such a flop.
I did say North wouldn't win a game.
Let's get into the last game of the round that Pez, that we continued on our Sunday session from the MCG. We went straight across to
the precinct.
To the precinct in Richmond. Beautiful establishment, and we continued having a couple of frothies watching the Fremantle versus Hawthorn game, and this was a very interesting game. It was very topsy-turvy, and there was a lot of things happening, but Pez, tell us how the Dockers got it done.
Well, the Dockers got it done by domination, only 15 points in the end source, but they were up 5-0 in the first quarter, and we thought it was going to be a bloodbath. Hawks came back in the second quarter, 5-1, and then it was pretty even. Then by that standards, the only thing keeping it even was Fremantle's goal kicking, which wasn't too flash hot, especially Nathan Fyfe, who kicked 0 goals, 6, and a little bit of a cheeky interview afterwards, said he'd practiced his goal kicking and was spotted on the ground, actually kicking over the man on the mark and kicking shots at goal, which is good to see.
Yeah, it was good to see the Fremantle Dockers really respond after last week. They sort of got called out for not being physical. They brought it up to the Hawks. This wasn't a game that they couldn't afford to lose because it's at home. You're playing the struggling Hawks, and they actually came out and they showed a lot of physicality. There were a lot of little spot fires going on, but you know they could have won this they should have won this by 30, 40 points. They dominated everything. They did just the experience through their midfield. They won the clearance of 16-5. They won the contested ball 41-33. They won the inside 50s 17-10, and they just didn't allow Hawthorn to get a real proper sniff into it. And it was just their inaccuracy in front of goal that prevented them from being big winners.
Yeah, you're exactly right. The only thing was the inaccuracy. But one thing to be impressed about if you are Hawthorn, Chad Wingard, as that recruit from Port Adelaide, in the last 2 weeks since he's come into the team, he's actually shown some fight and shown some good things. He had 26 disposals and a goal, which was really decent. Sean Darcy has been impressive over there, as well as the ruckman source. So when he comes up against Geelong, we'll see how you guys go against him without a ruckman yourself.
Yeah, well, we'll be the big loser then, Pez. But and for this one, who's your big winner? Who's your big loser? What do you go?
Big winner is Fremantle and Nathan Fyfe. And the reason he's a big winner, even though he kicked 6 behinds, he's actually going to be focused on that now. He's famous for kicking behinds before in the grand final against Hawthorn years and years ago. So I think he comes out and he kicks pretty straight and kicks multiple goals multiple times for the rest of the year.
Yeah, and I'm a big win for just the Fremantle offensive line there. Not offensive line, their forward line, their scoring attack. To get 31 shots on goal for a side that is famous for really dragging the life out of a game, and they showed not only that they can defend, but they started to put some offensive pressure on them. So big win for Fremantle Footy Club, and especially their forward line, and just being able to get multiple entries in there, as well as lock down Hawthorn and sort of restrict them to 21 scoring shots. 10 more scoring shots from a team that a lot of people had Hawthorn a lot higher, and Fremantle, they had them, about thereabouts with Hawthorn. Really, really big win for the Fremantle Football Club.
Yeah, really, really good job, and great job on the big win, little win source. We've got 3 games to go, and it's bring your own hashtag.
Hashtag.
This is interesting. It's a main event in any stadium in the world.
Hashtag going viral.
We can't go with it.
Hashtag bleep, bleep, bleep. That's all, folks.
And our first game, match of the round, indeed, Port Adelaide versus Richmond at home, a 2-point nail-biter at the end. Port Adelaide won 79 to Richmond 77 source. Richmond kept challenging throughout the game. Port Adelaide kicked away a couple of times, but Richmond kept on coming back, got the lead, and it was very topsy-turvy. A couple of missed shots, which Richmond might rue towards the end there, but Port Adelaide in that fourth quarter, with a lot of heart, the crowd behind them, had multiple injuries and multiple people go down, and they just got the 2-point win after losing that prelim final last week, and it was great to see the Port Adelaide crowd up and about.
Yeah, the Port Adelaide crowd, geez, do they love their footy, mate. There were some absolute passionate supporters that the TV definitely focused on during some of those questionable decisions, even though I think they got the rub of the stick there a couple of those times. But Robbie Gray, as you said, slotted a goal in the last 4 minutes to get the chocolates done. They're starting to build a really good rivalry here. After the last 3 years, they've had some really classic games. Remember one last year where they won by 1 or 2 points. They had that prelim final there, where Richmond got the chocolates. But Port Adelaide, I think they face a bit of adversity now because they're coming into. They lost last week in really yuck fashion to the West Coast Eagles and blown out. They've proven that they can win at home, Pez. And the question is are they able to perform away from Adelaide? Because the trend is starting developing. They've got some injuries now that maybe that's not the case. Maybe they did so well last year because of the hub and not because of the talent that we all think that they really have. Yeah,
well, 2 big injuries, Dersma and Butters, who will most likely be out for a period of time. But the big thing, you did mention it there, Source, winning away from home. They come down and play Carlton this week, and Carlton, coming back from Metricon, haven't been too impressive this year at all, Carlton, and pretty even money at the moment, where Port Adelaide, I think they're sitting favourites, but can they get the job done away from that Adelaide Oval? One player I did want to mention is Lockie Jones, and the reason I'm mentioning him is because how many times was he mentioned on the commentary by that Channel 7 team? Just relax. He's got a mullet. He's got a mustache. Good on him. And he plays for Port Adelaide.
And he's a big boy. Like, he is a big boy for a 19-year-old. But at the same time, he's had a year in the system. Like, he's not...
Let him play.
Let him just do his thing.
Let him play. He actually played decently, had 17 disposals there, 14 of them kicks. And the only downfall on him at the moment is he didn't have a tackle, and he had multiple opportunities to lay the tackle, but something just got in that situation there.
Yeah, something that I noticed from the game, I was a little bit disappointed with the Richmond midfield. I feel like we're that Prestia injury that has really, really affected them because their midfield just doesn't seem to have the same response as they do when he's in there. We remember last year when he went down and they went through that patch where they continued to just sort of win games, but they had that loss to Sydney during that time, and not the loss by Sydney. I think they won by like 5 points against Sydney. They had that loss to Port Adelaide last year when Prestia went down. But they need more effort from some of these midfielders. Their leading disposal getter was Jaden Short, who had 31. Bashahula had 26. Kane Lambert had 24. All these other guys need to be up in the 25s, 30s, and not only that, but they need to be winning the clearances as well. And they had Shea Bolton was your biggest clearance winner with 5, and Trent Cotchin, who looked like he was doing everything in that last quarter, he had 4. Like, where is everyone else in that midfield putting in the effort for a team that we are continually talking about as a dynasty? They need to respond, and they need to be doing it in better fashion, I think, through that midfield.
And they've usually got more players that rotate through there and get those clearances.
They seem very stagnant.
And the two players you mentioned, Jaden Short, Bashahuli, both kicking the ball out of defence and wanting to get the ball in their hands. Of course, Dustin Martin gave one off to Short, who kicked a goal from about 48 metres out, because he is a beautiful kick of the footy. But he's not in the middle winning the ball. So if you're not winning the ball there, you do put pressure on your defence, and that's how Port Adelaide were able to win that match in the end. So Richmond got a bit of a job to do, but Damien Hardwick did say during the week source, he said, we're a 3-time premiership team. We're coming off back-to-back, and we'll get it right.
Okay, all right. Pez, where is your hashtag for this one?
All right, Sauce. Now, I know it was a classic game, 2-point game, but I'm steering away from that. A little bit of sadder news. Xavier Dersma going down with a knee. He's out for about 12 to 14 weeks, so could see him out for most of the season here. So my hashtag is hashtag bow and arrow heartbreak.
That's a good one, Pez. I like that. Mine hashtag for it is hashtag Tiger King, not only for obvious reasons there's a range of different reasons for this one, man. I think that the Tigers are facing their first real bit of adversity coming into next week, playing the Saints, and who's the stars of the Saints, mate?
Hey, the King!
Tiger King. So that's what it is. They're facing their first bit of adversity, just like Joe Exotic always did. I've never actually seen it, but I'm sure there was lots of rubbish going on in that thing. But next week for the Richmond, it won't be rubbish. Hopefully they can respond. So that's my hashtag.
There you go. Well done.
All right, we get into the next game, Pez, the Western Bulldogs versus the Brisbane Lions. The Bulldogs sort of just were in cruise control all day, and they got a nice win at Mars Stadium, 73-54. They won by 19 points. It was a bit of a nothing sort of game, wasn't it?
It was. The Dogs were in control that whole time. Looked really cold down in Ballarat, sitting in the lounge room with the heater on myself. They know how to rug up down in Ballarat because it does get very, very cold down there. But the Bulldogs did this one with ease. Had players that were winning all around the park. Their forward line was even impressive. Harris Andrews did go down and do a sneaky shot at goal and kicked one for Brisbane because he was practicing, as we heard the commentators say, for hours upon hours before the game and before the start. But a comfortable 19-point victory in the end. Brisbane Lions never really seemed like they were going to come back and get into the game. And as impressive as the Bulldogs was, I did want to speak a little bit about the Brisbane Lions source, because watching them in the first 4 games of the year, something's just a little bit off with them. They're not the team that they were last season. And it all comes down to their effective disposals. They're mucking it up and turning that ball over at 50 to 70 metre out mark, where they're just not hitting that target, and it's actually missing by 5 or 6 metres in some cases, and the other teams are going down the other end and doing that. So I'm a little bit worried about Brisbane there. They do need to, come out and fire up. Lockie Neal's come out during the week saying he's got a bit of a back injury, but he's going to play through. So I don't take that
Neither do I.
as anything.
Especially when he came out last week and he said no excuses. We're in bad form.
If you've got an injury, don't play, or else
Yep.
you're not injured. You're 100% to go. So, very disappointed in Brisbane's disposal this year.
Yeah, and I think you sort of spoke about it. We spoke about it a couple of times, and everyone speaks about it, that, generally if you play the Western Bulldogs, you're conceding that you're going to lose the football in terms of the disposal count. Like, normally you have 3 or 4 players get over 30. They had one. The Brisbane Lions defended it well. They only had one player that got over 32, which was Jack McRae for the Doggies. But then they led all other disposals. Rich had 29, Lockie Neal had 27, McCluggage had 25, Lyons had 24, Harris Andrews had 23, Zorko had 23, Gardner had 22. But it's exactly what you said. They've got to be better users of the football. And we spoke last year about one of their biggest deficits was that they would just sort of fire away at goal. And it seems like they're doing that during the midfield. They're taking a lot of risks that they don't need to, unwarranted risks, and they're not the same team that they were. And I think some of the injuries and the inclusion of Joe Danaher and trying to get used to this tall timber sort of forward line has really affected them.
Yeah, well, plus 14 in the disposals, as you said, to Brisbane, which is surprising, but minus 17 in the inside 50. So that's not too good. They only had 8 goals, Sauce, and only 8 goals 6. But speaking of Joe Danaher, he did not mean that from the boundary. How's that goal on the right boot?
As the best accidental goal of the year ever. Like, Jesus Christ.
That was unbelievable. But we do get to our hashtags, Sauce, and I'll go first here. I've got in the Ballarat game, you might have noticed in the first quarter, it was Charlie Cameron. He was running in the pocket and he kicked a right foot banana and he missed to the left-hand goalpost. And this reminded me of suburban footy a lot. My hashtag is #hungry because that's what you heard from the crowd in the pocket in that first quarter. It was fantastic.
Yeah, that's a great one, Pez. Mine are Paddle Pop Lions, #Paddle Pop Lions, because not only are we talking about a cold, wintry day down there, the Lions have been ice cold, and I know that they've played at 3 different venues in 3 weeks in Melbourne, and so it's a little bit hard to get used to something. They'll be excited to return home, but at the moment, the Lions are really cold and very disappointing.
I really like that one. A bit of paddle pop.
Of course you do.
I have seen the Paddle Pop Lions logo replaced with the Brisbane Lions logo. I think that was a few years back when they were quite poor. So maybe that'll come back, Sauce. The next game is the game where we're at, the Melbourne Demons versus the Geelong Cats, where Melbourne probably should have won by a bit more in the end. Geelong, I don't know who did well, if it was Melbourne did poorly or Geelong did well to keep it. They got within 12 points, I think it was, in that fourth quarter. I saw sometimes their Sauce, but they lost by 25 points in the end, 12 goals 13, 85 to 9 goals 6, 60. Stephen May even went down to an accidental elbow from Tom Hawkins in the first quarter.
Oh, nasty.
And his eye blew up and we didn't know what was happening. He was walking off.
It looked like he hurt his back. And we were around some supporters that had radios and they're like, oh, it's his back. And someone said, oh, no, it's his eye. And the way he was walking, and we're like, well,
how does his eye affect that?
How does it affect it? But when you watch the replay, it was a brutal hit, an accidental hit, of course.
Because it was on the opposite side of the ground to us. We couldn't see too well.
Brutal. And, that actually, when that happened, I thought, because Geelong weren't playing well and Melbourne's defence were doing really well. And again, we don't know whether it was Geelong's poor forward entry or whether it was, the Melbourne Demons stepping up in that aspect. But it actually looked good for Geelong because they thought, you know what, May's gone down now. They might be able to get unleash Tomahawk a little bit more. But Geelong have got a lot of problems. They're 2-2, and we seem to, everyone's going to jump on Geelong because they're topping up at the older players. But their game style at the moment is rubbish. It is slow. It is indirect. It's not the same game plan that we were running last year.
They picked up Isaac Smith for pace as well, which is really strange.
Same with Shaun Higgins, though.
But they look good when Isaac Smith is running down the wing with freedom and kicking the ball inside 50, but they don't do it often enough because they slow down and they let Melbourne get back. And Melbourne, even though they lost May, they had Tomlinson cover Hawkins pretty well for the end, and Lever played a decent game in defence as well, Sauce. So they didn't really have that open space in the forward 50 because they didn't move the ball quick enough.
Yeah, and you are right, Pez. Geelong look their best when they are streaming along those wings. And, Jordan Clark, Ryan Myers, Constable, as you said, Smith, Jack Henry's got some pace. They've got players that have got pace. I don't know why they are continually slowing it down and swinging. Yes, we are a good user, team. Our efficiency for a kicking skill is really good. But they're just they're actually their worst enemy. And they're defending themselves a lot of the time because they've got some runs and they can take some high risks, go through the midfield. And it's very frustrating to watch. Very, very frustrating.
Oh, extremely frustrating. But what's not frustrating to watch is Melbourne at the moment. Christian Petrarca, absolutely amazing. Wow. 3 votes to him. But the player I'm most impressed with is the best small forward in the game source, Kysiah Pickett. He kicked 1 goal, 2. He's always in the right spot. I spoke to you a few times on the Sunday. He just gets the ball. He gets so many goal involvements and score involvements. But the big thing that impresses me, he had 7 tackles as well.
It's very rare that you see a player in this early into their career that not only has excitement, but every time he gets the ball or any time he's near the ball, the awe in the stadium was just expectation. And every time, as you said, he made the right decision. There was one where he picked up the ball and got a clearance and was a 2-on-1 and just this with ease, boom, bounce handball, popped straight back up. Great decision, just made the right decision. And in the rare times that he, the ball bounced the wrong way, he did make the right decision. Geez, he works hard to try and get it back.
Wow, he's got the skills, as we say. And a lot of players do come into the league source that have the skills. But he's got the footy brain already where he knows exactly what to do and exactly where to be, which is also super important. So Kysiah Pickett, one to watch in competition for the best small forward in the league, definitely. I've only been to 2 games this year, Source. They've both been Melbourne games, Melbourne St Kilda and Melbourne Geelong, and seeing him live both times, he is electric. So we'll go from him there. And what's your hashtag for that?
Hashtag for this one is just #cats and then inverted commas rebuild, because they need to start injecting some of these younger players into the side that are going to their effect. We can't continually top up players. And I'm actually hoping that we lose this week against North Melbourne so that Scott can get the sack and we can start implementing a game plan that works, because we need to rebuild our offense and we need to use the players that we've already got there rather than just putting in the 22 inverted commas best players. Put in something that's going to work for our brand of football that we're trying to win. And I know I'm a bit focusing on Geelong here. The Ds were really good, but there's big problems because they have gone and tried to buy a premiership in Jeremy Cameron, who's yet to play, and with some of these other players and topping up, they're in real dire straits of not making a top 4 finish at the moment.
If they don't make top 4 with that age demographic in the old folks' home down there at Geelong, they need to start to do something. My hashtag is just a hashtag for the whole Sunday Source, and it was just hashtag frothies, because there was plenty to be had.
There was plenty to be had, and it was good to be back at the football, Pez, at the G, having a couple of beers, having some banter around in the crowd, listening to some idiotic comments as well as hearing some great comments from the crowd. Geez, I've missed crowd participation in the football, Pez.
Oh, it's so good sitting around those people. You wouldn't usually be around and hearing what they say and just having a laugh at their expense, and you chirp them back a few times, just not looking at them or anything.
Nah, if you're going to chirp back, I love the chirp back. The best one was like, come on, umpire. He's, what was he saying? He's dropping his knees or something. No, what was he saying?
Oh, yeah.
There was some comment and the guy stuffed it up.
Ducking his knees.
Oh, he's ducking his knees. And I'm like to you, how do you duck your knees? What's that? And then he got, Joel Selwood got a free kick, for getting his head ripped off. He's like, too bad when he ducked his knees. That's bad. It's always good, a little bit of banter at the footy.
It was good back and forth between Geelong supporter and Melbourne supporter. Me sitting there as a bystander, just loving it as we went.
And then also just popping in a little bit of fuel here and there.
Yeah, I was trying to
quietly look back.
Yeah. I didn't want to get involved, but just put a little bit more on the fire. So that concludes Bring Your Own Hashtag Their Source, and we get into a new favourite segment, Coin Toss.
It was a toss of the coin.
That 5 wins the toss.
Yes, it's been an unusual year for joint tosses.
Big time again!
Oh, Pez, I think the intro goes longer than the actual segment's meant to. Coin toss is really simple. There's 2 sides to every coin, and realistically, short and sharp and sweet. I give, or Pez gives, a range of different questions, and you need to give Pez straight away a quick, snap, knee-jerk reaction, yay or nay. But in the first one, we're doing a triple. So last undefeated team, Pez, you've got the Doggies, who are 4-0. You've got Melbourne, who are 4-0, and Sydney 4-0. Last undefeated team is?
Dogs.
Cool.
Is that short and sharp for you?
Yeah, I go Dogs as well. They got a pretty easy run.
They got Gold Coast GWS next 2 weeks.
Yeah. And I think Melbourne, they've got Hawthorn and Richmond. They'll probably drop one against Richmond. But if they can get past Richmond, they could easily be the last one standing. No shoe-in for the Swans, Pez?
They're playing GWS, they're playing Gold Coast, and they're both losable games for Sydney at the moment. We don't know how they are going. The next one is something that's come up this week. We've got De Goey, and is he up to the standard that of what is he on? $1 million a year or whatever he is? Is he up to that standard of a contract?
Yes, compared to Grundy.
Yeah, compared to
but overall, no. He's not performing. You know, he's averaging under 15 disposals a game. He's not having many score involvements. He's down on every stat around. But is that his fault or is that the midfield?
That was going to be my point. I say he's not up to the standard that he's shown before, but it is on the midfield. Brodie Grundy's winning the hitouts. The midfield's not winning the footy, and if he's playing up forward and not getting first use of the ball and all that space inside forward 50, he can't really go to work, can he? So I think Collingwood's actual game style at the moment is not helping him in any way.
All right, next one has been a little bit of chatter with the AFLW this week with a concussion going to one of the main players who's now unavailable for the grand final. And we already have it in the male game, the AFL bye before the finals. But the question is now if we would go to more of a Super Bowl NFL sort of scheme where we have the bye before grand final week or before the actual AFL final start.
It's a really hard one because when is this going to stop? It came in before the finals to get players right who were carrying niggling injuries and they wanted the best players to be playing. But you go into a prelim final and Dustin Martin gets a concussion and he can't play in the grand final because it's a week later. Do you have 2 weeks just to prevent that? At 1 year source, it's going to happen where a big name player will have to miss because of concussion. And I think the AFL will actually just sign that off anyway and let them play. So I'll say keep it before the finals at the moment.
Totally disagree, Pez. I think that they should have a week off before the grand final to allow the 2 best teams that have survived that far to, you know, have the best opportunity to win. Not like the Doggies did and have a week to recover, and that way you're more guaranteed that the better teams are there for longer and that we get to see whoever the best 2 teams are, they get to have a week of recovery, they get to have a week of game plan. Oh, that'd be so much better.
Look, I think there's a bit of an argument to that because the team, if they get a week off and then they play and then they win that first week and they're in the top 4, they actually get another week off and then have to play a prelim and then they get another week off. I don't know where it is going to stop. Just have a week off before every final thing or whatever, but maybe for another day.
Sounds good. Yeah. All right, last one, Pez. This is one without notice that I sort of chucked in there while we were talking, and so I don't know if you've seen it or not. Very quickly, we talked about excitement machines, and 2 of the most exciting players in the game, and 2 small forwards that are electric, and they just seem to make the right decisions. They're electric. They're exciting. They're great footballers to watch. Simple, Pez. Flying Ryan or Kysiah Pickett?
Don't make me pick. No, Flying Ryan.
Yeah, it's Flying Ryan at the moment, but Kysiah Pickett is not far behind for a 3-game player.
Not far behind, and he can. He goes into the middle as well and makes an impact in that centre square. So, very, very impressive and sneaky of you, Source, to put that in after my comments on Pickett during the Melbourne game. But decent show there. We've gone through with all our segments. Really enjoyed that and a different little spin on it. So make sure you jump on anything that you have to add at Behind the Bound on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. I've been Pez. Peace out.
Yeah, make sure you jump on iTunes or whatever platform you listen to podcasts. Leave a review, 5 stars. That's how everyone will be able to find us. I'm still Sauce and we'll catch up next time.